with Luffy. How would this even go down? Well, first of all, I think we'd have to start off all the way back to where the Straw Hats were split up. I think the only way to make this work is if the Straw Hats never got zooted off to an island by Kuma. There's really only one way this could happen. The real Kuma doesn't show up to fight the Straw Hats at all, leading to the Straw Hats barely escaping Sentomaru and the pacifistas. I think as they're sailing, they'd still be trying to figure out a way to get to Fishman Island until Nami and Robin read the newspaper. This is how they'd figure out that Ace is gonna be executed. Once Luffy hears about this, he'd immediately change the plan. Just like in the actual One Piece, in Two Piece, or whatever you want to call these what ifs, Luffy would try to free him from Impel Down. I think this would actually work perfectly since the Straw Hats wouldn't have lost 3 days from flying through the sky. With those 3 extra days, they should be able to get it Impel Down on time. Before we get to what would happen in Impel Down, I humbly ask you guys to subscribe to my channel. I literally reread all of Impel Down and Marineford just to make an accurate what if for this video. I'll also be dropping many more what ifs throughout the years, so subscribe for that as well. Also, if you don't really care about what would happen in Impel Down and only want to see what would happen in Marineford, then skip to this timestamp. And now getting back to the video, so once the Straw Hats actually get to Impel Down, I think they'd split up. I think Nami and Frankie would stay back on the ship. Nami would stay because she would have to navigate them in and out of there. Frankie would stay to protect the Sunny. I also think Usopp and Chopper would stay back since they might be afraid. That probably wouldn't be the only reason they stayed back, however, I feel like it would play a part. I think the real reason would be because Robin would tell everyone that the less people that go, the better. The reason being since it's a prison and they're not trying to get caught. It's best if the strongest and most stealth go. That would lead to Luffy, Zoro, Sanji, Robin, and Brook going. And if you don't think Brook is capable, then just remember that he was the one who stole Big Mom's poneglyph. I also feel like he'd say something like, I already went 50 years alone on a ship. You think I'm afraid of a little jail time? Yo ho ho ho! Also guys, let me know in the comments who you think would sneak in. Now, I feel like for them to pull up, they'd have to be in the Mini Mary. I think using the Sunny would be way too risky, especially with all the Marines that are coming to defend against Whitebeard pirates. I think the Sunny would keep its distance up until the point when they escape. Maybe they'd use some kind of signal or something to tell Nami when they're breaking out. Maybe they'd use some transponder snails. Sanji would probably be the one to carry it. Now, once they get to Impel Down, it'd be a lot different from the actual arc. Boa was able to get Luffy in without anyone noticing, and this would be completely different. This time, the Straw Hats would use a combined attack to break down the barrier of Impel Down. There's no way the prison guards would unlock the doors, so this would be the only option. This means that right off the bat, they're being chased down by the guards. This would be even more chaotic than actual Impel Down. I think Magellan wouldn't fight Luffy right away though, because he'd probably be having a pretty bad dump. He'd probably command Hannibal and the soldiers to take care of it for the time being. Now, as this happens, the Straw Hats mainly face fodder. Hannibal allows the Straw Hats to run loose for a while since he thinks that if Luffy breaks in, Magellan will lose his job, leading to him becoming the warden. If you think this is a stretch, well, similar scenarios actually happened. There's even a point where Hannibal allows Luffy to go crazy until he realizes that he could also lose his job. Also, I think the Impel Down people would be wondering who Sanji and Brook are. They'd probably eventually guess who Sanji is because of his eyebrows, but Brook would remain a complete mystery. After this incident, he'd be a wanted man again. All of this leads to the Straw Hats finding a man running for his life. It's Buggy. Buggy recognizes Luffy and Zoro, but not the rest. He says the same thing to Luffy, except to the both of them this time. They then explain to him how they're trying to save Ace. He calls them all insane and then continues to fight the Impel Down soldiers. It would be really fun to see all the Straw Hats defeating a Bluegori. I also think it'd be funny to see the Straw Hats' reactions to Luffy giving Buggy his armband. Remember, Buggy accidentally screamed that it leads to Captain John's treasure, and I think the Straw Hats would be a lot less trusting than Luffy. They'd probably tell Luffy things like, you don't have to give it to him, we can find Ace on our own. And then Luffy would be like, it's okay guys, we need to find Ace as fast as possible, and he already knows where to go, and then give it to Buggy. After this, Buggy would still cry, think about cheating Luffy, and then get his karma. Now, I think the most exciting thing to see out of Impel Down would be the Straw Hats matchups. I think Luffy would still one-shot the Basilisk. Robin would probably carry him whenever he becomes small. Also, Zoro would probably fight the Mantis since it's a swordsman. I think some of the funniest matchups could be against the Manicores. Sanji would probably defeat them by describing the best way to cook beef steak, because remember, that's what they say. As one of them also says strawberry panties, Brook would say, "No, it's may I see your panties," and then do one of those badass slices. The Manicores would remember this and mimic Brook for as long as they're alive. I wonder if Robin would think any of these animals are cute. I mean, they look pretty fugly to me. I mean, this one looks kind of... Now, for the Sphinx, I feel like the Straw Hats could have beaten him without Bon Clay, but Bon still would have introduced himself by helping them. Also, it'd be really interesting to see Robin's reactions to seeing Bon Clay and Mr. 3. At this point, Mr. 3 would also be tagged along, and I think he and Buggy still would have teamed up. Another thing with Robin is once they get to level 3 or 4, she'd have a scene for the boys. She'd take off her clothes just like how she did at Punk Hazard.
Lord have mercy, I'm about to bust.
In level 3, I think Brook would say a bones joke since the sand is made from the prisoner's bones. I think at this point, Magellan would make a similar plan to waiting for the Straw Hats in level 4. I think he'll say that if they still haven't been defeated, then he'll kill them himself. I think when they actually meet Magellan, Luffy would command everyone to split up because he's too strong. This is just like what he wanted to do at Sabaody. The Straw Hats would be forced to trust him since he's created miracles in the past. After this, Luffy would still take him on trying to defend his friends. Of course, he'd lose, which would lead to Bon Clay saving him. Once Magellan wins, I think he'd try to figure out a way to capture the rest. Since they're all split up, he'd have to wait it out until he sees where they are. While the Straw Hats are alone, I think they could have some crazy side missions. Robin might find the Poneglyph. Zoro would most definitely get lost. He'd probably go up levels even though he's trying to go down. However, I think he'd eventually find his way in level 5. Maybe by cutting through the ground. Now, for the rest of the Straw Hats, Sanji would become a secret agent, and Brook would go with Buggy and Mr. 3. He'd help them break out all the prisoners, but would always have the goal to return to Luffy somehow. Maybe Brook would also be worshipped somehow as some spirit that came from the dead to save them. I mean, Impel Down is called Hell, so maybe they think he's Satan, just like that one island. I feel like they'd be split up for a minute, up until the point of Luffy healing. I also don't think they'd be captured overnight since Buggy and Mr. 3 weren't captured. I think the secret mission Sanji would do would be to take out the transponder snails. I know Shiryu did it in the real manga, but if Sanji wasn't this arc, I think it'd be better if he did it. I think he would figure out a way to completely cut out the transmission, leading the Impel Down workers being completely blind. They wouldn't be able to see anything that's going on. I don't think this would happen right away, but would probably happen right around the time that Luffy breaks everyone out. Once Luffy does that, I think the rest of the Straw Hats would somehow find him as he goes up the levels. I mean, it'd honestly be hard to miss him at that point. It'd be really cool to see their reactions to freeing Croc, especially Robin's. Once Luffy broke everyone out of level 6, I think he'd find Zoro in level 5. They'd probably find him freezing to death. This would give Jump Island vibes. After this, they go up a level and Luffy meets Blackbeard. The moment that Blackbeard smashes Luffy head into the ground, Zoro would leap at Blackbeard trying to kill him, only for his attack to be blocked by Luffy's cane. Jinbei would still have to convince them to not fight and then move on. Magellan would meet them for the second time, and this time Eva would stay back to fight him. Eva would still lose, leading to Magellan making his way to the prisoners. I think this time, Luffy, Sanji, and Zoro would all fight him with Mr. 3's help. Zoro would say how this feels familiar. I think Robin and Brook would be responsible for calling Nami and telling her to pick them up. Her and the ones left on the Sunny would be struggling because they'd be facing a bunch of warships. This is where Jinbei would step in to help them with Croc, Daz Bones, and Buggy. Once they take out the warships, they'd keep one for the prisoners of Impel Down to get on. The escapees would jump onto the whale sharks, be brought to the ships, and leave Impel Down. Bonchan would still save everyone, and this time Frankie, Chopper, and Usopp would cry with the escapees. Frankie would think that Bon's actions are the manliest thing ever. This time around, I think Luffy would be on the Sunny instead of the stolen ship. I think when everyone is praising Buggy, Nami and Zoro would scream to them that he's actually just an idiot from their boat. Jinbei would once again brush off Arlong and wait for a better time to talk about it. I think the two ships would sail together towards Marineford and luckily get through the gates. This would lead to both ships ending up on the top of the ice at Marineford. And now it's time for the moment that you've all been waiting for. Marineford. everything pretty much starts out the same as the actual Marineford. Well, except for one thing. I think Boa Hancock wouldn't show up to Marineford if Luffy never went to Amazon Lily. In case you forgot, she was completely opposed to the idea of fighting alongside the world government, even if it were to hurt the people of her country. She was 100% confident that the world government would forgive her. Even when Gloriosa tries to knock some common sense in her, Boa ends up lying to her and then throws her out a window. Basically, it seems like there's nothing that can convince her to go to Marineford until Luffy shows up. Now, without her, Sengoku would still expose Ace's true identity, the warlords, admirals, and Whitebeard fleet would be introduced. Oars goes crazy until Doffy cuts his leg off, and Whitebeard shows us why he's the strongest man in the world. As all of this is happening, Garp tells Ace how he really feels, and just as this is happening, everyone notices something coming out of the sky. They hear yelling and see people falling, but who could it possibly be? Could it be a secret attack from the Whitebeard pirates? No! It's the Straw Hat Pirates with a bunch of impaled down escapees. As they're falling, Luffy wouldn't be afraid since he's made out of rubber. Zoro would be showing slight amounts of fear for the first time in 100 chapters. Frankie would be screaming, "This is a super way to fall!" Robin would be more afraid of what happens to Chopper than what happens to her, and she might even hug him as they're falling. Chopper would be crying out of fear. Brook would be right under Nami and would be looking at her panties. Nami and Usopp would be scared for their life and would be screaming for someone to save them. Nami would probably say something like, "Eek, I'm just a young girl, I can't die yet!" Sanji would probably be like, "Nami Swan, you're so cute even when you're scared, let me save you!" and ends up saving her. Usopp, on the other hand, would probably be jumping on Zoro begging for his help. Just like in actual Marineford, they would all land in the water, including the Sunny. I think unlike how the marine ship was destroyed, I think the Sunny would survive that impact since it's made out of atom wood. Zoro and Sanji would probably gather up all the Straw Hats that are drowning, whilst Jinbei would probably gather the rest of the Devil Fruit users. Now, from here on out, everything is pretty similar. The only difference would be that everyone reacts to the entire Straw Hat crew instead of just Luffy and the impaled down guys. It would also be really cool to see the Straw Hats' reactions to seeing Whitebeard in first person. I would want to see Usopp's reaction since he was the one who looked terrified when Ace brought him up. The rest of the Straw Hats didn't really seem to know much, but at this point, they would know that his nickname is the strongest man in the world. Robin should already know about him, but even guys like Nami and Sanji probably read a lot about him from the newspapers over the past week. It would be insane to see them react to Luffy talking to Whitebeard as an equal. After this happens, we'd finally see all the Straw Hats get into action. Just like how Luffy started out by kicking a bunch of Marines' butts, the Straw Hats would follow him and do the same thing. This is where I think we could potentially see a little friendly competition begin between Zoro and Sanji. As they're fighting fodder, Sanji would probably tease Zoro on how he's already defeated 20 Marines while Zoro hasn't even gotten one. The reason Zoro would be struggling would be because he would be fighting someone decently strong like a giant. Zoro would then slice through the guy and leave him there for the crows. He would then tell Sanji, "My one giant is worth 100 Marines, so technically I'm in the lead, Mr. 20. Sanji would probably get furious and he and Zoro would probably start literally fighting mid-Marineford. People around them would be like, "Who the hell are these dudes? Aren't they a part of the same crew?" That's when the two of them would agree to a competition of whoever could outdo each other in the war. It would be similar to their competition on Fishman Island. As the Straw Hats are running straight through the war, Jinbei defeats Moria as he tries to go after Luffy. Right after this, Smoker smacks Luffy across the face and then takes him to the ground. The Straw Hats, still not understanding the importance of hockey, pretty much stand no chance against him. Now remember, this time Boa wouldn't be there to protect Luffy, so this time, some of the Whitebeard pirates help him. I feel like maybe Blamenko, whoever the hell that is, or Izo would pull up. Remember, Izo was strong enough to take down a CP0 member. I think Smoker would definitely be stronger, but Izo should be able to hold him off for some time, especially if Flamenco fights with him. Also, I think while this happens, Zoro might have a clash with Tashigi. He'd probably clash with her and then break her swords, and then say a Loki sexist line. Sanji would probably start arguing with him over what he tells her. Also, thank God for Sanji's sake that Boa isn't at Marineford, because if she was, he'd be completely useless.
I wanna... He's as hard as a rock!
After this, the Straw Hats go up against the Pacifistas and learn what happened to Kuma. Eva takes care of the situation and the Straw Hats keep moving. As they're running, Zoro starts to sweat as he gets PTSD. it's Mihawk right in front of them. Mihawk still ends up cutting Luffy and mainly goes up against Luffy until he grabs Buggy. I feel like Luffy would still use Buggy as a human shield since he'd rather have Buggy get hurt than any of his crew members. After this, Mihawk would try one more slice on Luffy, and right when he's about to cut him, Zoro comes into play and blocks it. Zoro finally got his act together after momentarily being frozen from his PTSD. Also, it doesn't really seem like Mihawk was using Haki since he didn't do any damage to Buggy, so I think Zoro would have actually been able to clash with him. This would show how much progress he's made and Mihawk would acknowledge it. Everyone in Marineford would be paying attention to this moment, and many would say things like, who the hell are these guys? This guy has the ability to be his own captain, and he's only the right-hand man? Zoro would then announce to Mihawk that he's still coming for his throne and that one day he'll surpass him. As he says this, everyone has a similar reaction, like when Luffy was trash-talking Whitebeard. They'd all be like, he's arguing with the world's strongest swordsman, where does he get the guts? Mihawk would probably smile at Zoro and tell him something like, you still got a long ways to go, Roronoa. Next thing you know, Vista comes in out of nowhere, yelling, I'm also coming for your head, Mihawk. Now go, young one. Go protect your captain and save Ace. I can handle this. Zoro listens to him as he understands that his main priority is to protect Luffy. After this, the whole squad thing takes place, and then Whitebeard shows us why he's the Chad of Chads. I wonder if Usopp would look up to Whitebeard as being a brave warrior of the sea. Also, while Akainu is sending meteorites left and right, it'd be fun to see more of Zoro's and Sanji's friendly competition. It'd be cool to see one of them destroy one of the meteorites, and then the other do it right after just to compete. Also, what do you guys think the rest of the Strawhats would be doing during the war? I feel like Frankie would also go ham and would do the most damage besides the big three. I honestly think Frankie would be the type of guy to get along with the newcomer people, so I could even see him getting everyone to yell super with him, at least once throughout the war. Now for Robin, I feel like she'd take out hundreds of Marines with her Devil Fruit abilities. Most of them wouldn't even see it coming. I also wonder if Robin would be spying on the Marines and finding out their plots. She probably could have done this with her spying abilities and then told Luffy about it, who would then tell everyone else. For Chopper, I think he'd fight for most of the war, but would also be used as a doctor. We saw in the Wano War how he healed thousands of soldiers, and I think there's a chance he would do that in Marineford, which helps out the Whitebeard Pirates significantly. I also think there'd be a scene where Chopper goes into his monster point. I feel like Nami would force the monster trio to protect her no matter what, but would still take a ton of Marines with her lightning. Now for Brook, he'd honestly probably go crazy with the fodder, but I don't see him taking out anyone decently strong. For Usopp, I think he'd be a wimp for the beginning of the war, but after seeing people like Whitebeard, Luffy, and Zoro do their thing, he'll do his thing too. I feel like Usopp might run away or try to avoid combat out of fear, but would have a moment to himself where he mentally prepares himself to fight. The scene would cut off with him committing to fighting for Luffy. His next appearance would be legendary, which I'll be getting to in a sec. Now, the next thing that would happen would be Jinbei throwing Luffy to the admirals. Right when Kizaru sent Luffy back to where he came from, Sengoku commands the Marines to execute Ace. Just as they're about to do it, the most unexpected thing happens. A man named Sogeking comes out of nowhere and shoots the Marines down with a firebird. The executioners fall to the ground unconsciously and Ace gets burned for the first time in years. Chopper gets excited and says, "Oh, Sogeking! I didn't know you were a friend of Ace's." Luffy would see Sogeking from a distance and yell out his name, Sogeking! The rest of the Strawhats would be wrong in thinking that Sogeking is Usopp. I feel like this would be the ultimate way for the Straw Hats to replace Crocodile's scene of saving Ace. I think after Sogeking does this, he'll tell one of Usopp's lies, which is the fact that he has 8,000 men. He'd say this out of fear because he wouldn't want people to mess with him. The funny thing about this would be that he'd actually gain hundreds of Whitebeard's men to protect him. Since he saved Ace, they owe him their life. Now, the next thing that would happen to the Straw Hats would be facing Kobe. I feel like it would be a bit different since Zoro might take out Helmeppo. I also think that after Aokiji defeats Jozu, he'd face the Straw Hats. He'd probably tell Robin, "Why would you show up here? You know we have to capture you now, right?" He'd then attack her, only for it to be blocked by Sanji's Diable Jambe. Unlike last time, the Straw Hats would actually be able to defend themselves against Aokiji. Sanji might even be able to hurt him with his fire. Now, the Straw Hats obviously wouldn't be able to defeat him or really escape him, so I could see Jinbei pulling up to fight him off. This would actually be a pretty interesting fight since Jinbei might able to manipulate the ice with his water techniques. Right as the Straw Hats escape the Admiral, they're faced with another issue. Ace is about to die. Yet again, just as the swords are about to hit Ace, Luffy yells out a roar that shakes the entire world. This roar is so extreme that it makes many soldiers pass out. Anyone strong understands this is the haki of the Supreme King. At this point in the story, this would be the first time Luffy's haki is confirmed since he wouldn't have used it at Amazon Lily. This would be the first time we learn what Conqueror's haki is and that Luffy obtains it. The Straw Hats wouldn't really understand what he did, but they'd be in awe. They'd probably remember the time he used it against Moto Boalo. I honestly wonder how their reactions would go. I feel like Nami or Sanji would hear people talking about Conquerors and would ask what it is. This may be our introduction to it. I could see Ivankov explaining it. Whitebeard's reaction would still be to command his men to follow Luffy. Luffy would lead the charge with the Straw Hats by his side. Inazuma would then give Luffy a pat and Luffy would run up it alone. After this, you guys know the story. Luffy punches Garp, saves Ace, and then Ace and Luffy have a moment together where they fight Marines. I honestly think that from here on, the Straw Hats are separated from Luffy. I think they'd meet back up with him when everyone is trying to leave. I think this would lead up to the Straw Hats witnessing Ace die right alongside Luffy. I wonder if any of them would try to defend Luffy when Akainu tries to kill him. If they did, I think Ace would get in the way of it first. If the Straw Hats went to Marineford with Luffy, I still think Ace would die. The Straw Hats aren't very strong at this point, so when it comes to a guy like Akainu, there's really nothing they can do. Considering that Jinbei and Marco stepped up to fight Akainu, I don't think the Straw Hats would do anything even if Akainu was still trying to kill Luffy. Nami and Chopper would tear up as they feel for what Luffy's going through. Sogeking also might have tears behind his mask. Although Frankie cries a lot too, I think he'd be serious in this scene. Zoro and Sanji would also be serious. Same thing with Robin and same with Brook. Once Luffy passes out, their main priority would be to get Luffy to safety. Either Frankie or human form Chopper would carry him as they head for the Sunny. I think this would allow Jinbei to continue to fight Akainu instead of protecting Luffy. If this happens, Luffy might not get his scar. Crocodile would also step in to save Luffy. I think that once the Straw Hats get there, they use a Coup de Burst to get their way out of there. I think this time Law may not show up because Chopper could heal Luffy on his own. The Coup de Burst would be so extreme that there's no way any Marine could catch up to them. After this, the same thing happens on Marineford. Blackbeard takes Whitebeard's fruit and then Shanks stops the war. The biggest difference here would be what happens to Luffy. Luffy wouldn't wake up to Jinbei this time and would instead be surrounded by his friends. He'd still have to wake up to the harsh reality that Ace died. I think Zoro would play the Jinbei role. He'd knock some sense back into Luffy and make him realize that Ace is dead. I think this time there'd be no time skip since all the Straws are together. I wonder if Ray Lee would still find them and try to teach Luffy Haki. If this happens, then they'd probably all learn together. That's only if it happens though. If it doesn't happen, then they'd head straight to Fishman Island and the New World. I think the Straws that ended up learning Haki would end up learning it sometime along the way. Maybe Jinbei would help them learn it at Fishman Island. Who knows? But yeah, that pretty much wraps up what I think would have happened if the Straws went to Marineford, and if you still want more what ifs to watch, then click on this video right here. It's what if Luffy awakened Gear 5 at